Hi, everybody. Welcome to this latest episode of Real Talk with Rick, the podcast related to all people and all things Eden Prairie, Minnesota. So my guest today is someone who retired after a long career, a 35-year career with the city of Eden Prairie, Molly Koivumaki. Molly, for 20 years, about 20 years, worked in a variety of roles in the city police department. You're going to hear about that. And she spent her last 15 years in Eden Prairie in the Housing and Community Services Division of Community Development. And you're also going to hear about that newly created division that she led at the time that it began and still exists and thrives to this day. I asked Molly about what she's been up to since her retirement, and we talk a little bit about answering some of the questions that I've asked many of our previous podcast guests about, related to some of their proudest moments, and if they were on a desert island, what would they bring? So here is my conversation with former city employee, retired city employee, Molly Koivumaki. Molly Koivumaki, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for asking me.
Yes. So could you tell our listeners now I know you're retired. You're retired from the city of Eden Prairie. But when you retired, what were you doing at that time and prior to that?
Well, when I retired, I had just finished up 15 years in Housing and Community Services, which is part of community development. So I oversaw a small staff of 3, and we worked on housing programs, bringing affordable housing into Eden Prairie, which is not easy to do, and also on preserving the units that we have. We also worked on human services, providing social services, if you will, different to families. We had different programs that we sponsored to help out the kids in school and seniors and things like that. So it was a very robust office. We had a lot of service and a lot of activity with other nonprofits, and I will talk forever about it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And that department's still here. And Jonathan came in and took your place when you retired. But for 15 years, you were part, I guess at that time, like you said, in the community development department was kind of a newer office when that began. 15 years prior to your retirement.
Right. It was a newer office. I was in the PD before that, and this new opportunity came up in community development where it was being reorganized, and I was asked to take a look and consider overseeing that. And what it did was bring together all of the social service providers that the city works with into more organized fashion, if you will, so that we were able to not duplicate services, to really use our resources in the best way and really reach as many people as we can. And, we also worked a lot with the school district, and that was part of what we did and continues to happen, is a lot of interaction with the district. We all serve the same people.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
and I think I've been here 9 years, and when you were there, and it was located in the mall, it still is, that office, that there are school district employees that have worked there, Hennepin County people, other social services agencies that partner and are at the mall. So that was new at the time that you started that.
Right, and that was one of the things that we sold when we when the division started, Rick. We were splintered around City Hall. I was up here, and the other staff were in different parts of the building, and it was not a good way to run a team. And so I was looking for a place to house us. And I remembered that when the center redeveloped, there was a TIF agreement, and part of that TIF agreement set aside up to 5,000 square feet somewhere in the mall for a city use. I have no idea how I remembered that, because
that's good.
And it was set to expire. That agreement was going to expire if we didn't get in there. It was going to expire. So I remembered that almost at the nick of time, because it was maybe months away from expiring. And I thought maybe that could be the place where we have housing and community services, because it's there's a bit of dignity, if you will, for serving people that don't have to come into City Hall and maybe see their neighbors and things like that work here. I mean, when you're at the mall, it's just a more neutral location. So Yeah, that was an interesting summer getting that put together and convincing your predecessor and the city councils and HUD and the mall that it's really, this is really something that will be beneficial to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can understand. I mean, you come in to City Hall to do transactional business, and you can apply for a building permit, and you can do all kinds of stuff. Your questions can be answered. But if it's a matter of kind of sitting down one-on-one and working through maybe a sensitive personal issue, I can totally see why what you would call a neutral location, or even, people are coming and going from the mall all the time. So that's a good spot.
Well, and the other thing, too, is that our clients usually always have family with them and children. And, children are going to be loud and they're going to run around because they're children. So It's hard to do that in this kind of a setting. And it was really conducive to working with families. When people brought their kids in down there, we had areas set aside for kids to play, and just a lot less disruption.
And you came out of the police department before that setup occurred in the mall and the community development department. So what was your role in the police department then?
Well, in the police department, I had many roles. So it was really a fun time to be in. I spent 20 years in the police department, and it was in a very huge development process. The police department was changing and growing, and it's really under the leadership of Jim Clark, really given an opportunity to do so many things in that department and really connect with the community on a number of different levels. So crime prevention is probably the first community activity that I did as a crime prevention specialist, doing security surveys, doing talks about Neighborhood Watch, wearing the McGruff suit more times than I would like to.
Yes.
Scaring the daylights out of teachers, because we used to do a birthday McGruff. McGruff would go and visit school kids on their birthday, and so I had the McGruff outfit on, and I was waiting in the lunchroom at Forest Hills, waiting for the next group to come in, and the teacher didn't know I was in the lunchroom, and she came in, and here's this big furry McGruff creature.
Oh, yeah.
She started screaming, and I started screaming. It was kind of, it was so. Yeah, that's kind of the start I had into doing a lot of community things through crime prevention.
So to kind of time that out, so from 1983 roughly to 2003, a lot of time spent in the PD, and some of that time in the early to mid to late 80s was a lot of the crime prevention.
Right.
And you, so you went out. You would go not only to the schools, though. You'd interact with businesses and homeowners.
Right.
And
as time went on, we hired a new crime prevention person who worked alongside of me, and I kind of branched out into business crime prevention and really enjoyed that. That was a completely different area, and a lot of new challenges and a lot of new opportunities to have fun and to do business crime prevention in a way that could kind of be creative and get people's attention. One of the things that I like to do is show somebody how I could break into their building.
Yes.
And that was a lot of fun. And we did it in a way that was not kind of an in-your-face, but it was real educational and, kind of added a fun element. And I had a lot of really good feedback from people that said, thank you for pointing this out and not just handing me a piece of paper to say, here are 3 things you need to do, but to actually make it interactive.
So what would be, give me an example. Would you have, access to the building before you did the presentation, and you would talk specifically about where you were? Or just in general, you knew from where I'm located in this business, these are the 2 or 3 things I could have done right here in this building?
Exactly. So sometimes I would have a business owner walk through with me, and I would show them, here are the vulnerable places you can actually jar the store open. The lock is so poor that it isn't going to take much force to get in.
Yeah.
Here are card readers, and this was kind of common, where card readers for underground parking, you could put any your Visa card, anything that had
I remember that, and that would sometimes activate.
And it would activate
it.
And so that was a lot of fun to be going around finding out where those were, and that always surprised people that they didn't know that those could be activated by any strip.
Because isn't there that whole thing about garage doors being opened by other people's garage door openers in neighborhoods and stuff?
Yeah.
Goofy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The different frequencies, radio frequencies. So So the business crime prevention was really fun. I worked a lot with the Chamber of Commerce, too. I remember I had an opportunity to do a very big presentation at one of the monthly Chamber of Commerce meetings, and I had gone out on I called it a photo safari, and I took slides of locks and landscaping and all kinds of things that were important to me, like the air gap between the door and the door frame, and trash enclosures, things that meant a lot to me that I thought, they're going to find us so exciting when they talk about all that.
Yeah, you're into it.
Yeah, so I put this presentation together, probably had 70 slides. This is before PowerPoint. It was slides.
Yeah.
I thought it was so good, and I thought, I'm going to nail this. I'm going to get so many requests for presentations. And so we had an officer who had a broken leg, and he couldn't do anything. He had to just do a desk duty. So I said, hey, Bob, I'm going to show you this presentation because I think it's really good. I want to get your feedback before I give it to the chamber. I got maybe a quarter way through, and he's like, well, I got to go. And I'm like, what? You don't have anywhere to go. You have to listen to this. And I thought, well, he's just, okay. So I went home that night, and the presentation was the next day at lunchtime. So I said to my husband, hey, I want you to go through this presentation with me and tell me what you think. We got to just about the same point, and he had that look, and it was like, this was killing him. He said, these are pictures of locks and lights and doors and air gaps between doors. This means something to you, but it is so boring. You can't make this presentation. It's like, oh, no.
The night before.
So I stayed and just kept going through it and thinking about it and really pared it down to maybe 35 slides. I think I tried to cut it in half. And
you had like 70 slides?
Yeah.
70, 50 slides of locks and doors.
Yeah, and trash enclosures. Landscaping.
Yeah, I'm only going to show 4 locks and 3 trash enclosures, not 15.
I mean, the bolt was like 3 inches long.
Right.
So I did pare it down, and I do like to make presentations.
I've seen some of them. I've seen you do a good job before. But this was early on. This was a learning moment, wasn't it?
And I just was very honest with the chamber, and I told them what had happened, and then I said, so, here we go. This is what I've got. I told them, that this had been very important to me, but when I viewed it through somebody else's perspective, I realized that maybe it was pretty boring. And so I think that got their attention. Anyway, the presentation went really well, and I got so many requests after that to come out and do security surveys of different businesses, and it was one of those rare things that, like, years after, I would run into somebody at one of the local civic events, and they go, remember that presentation you did? You showed us all those locks, and you showed us all those lights. And and then I guess the biggest compliment I got after that, and then I'll quit talking about it, was a business lady came up to me after the presentation, and she said, I didn't even plan on listening. I can't believe I learned all that. I didn't even plan to listen to you. So
I wasn't going to stay.
I thought that was probably the best compliment. So
no, that's good. Well, I liked how your husband was honest with you, but a fellow cop was not.
Right.
I gotta go.
Yeah,
well, what do you have to say about the presentation? Nothing. I've got to go. But your husband gave you good feedback. It helped because you set the bar at a spot that worked with the group the next day.
It did, and that was a dangerous thing for him to enter into that arena of giving critical feedback like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good. So talk a little bit about the PD and crime prevention, but you also got into the area of emergency management too, right? And even crisis negotiation.
Right.
So talk about those roles a little bit.
Well, emergency preparedness starting in about the mid-'90s and then till the early 2000s. I was the emergency manager for the city of Eden Prairie, and I have to say that was a highlight of my career with the PD, is doing the emergency management, because of the amount of things that you learned and of the challenge and of responding to the different emergencies that would come up, fires and tornadoes and ice storms, all the different stuff that you have to plan for and then show up and help manage. But that was the preparedness aspect of it and trying to get folks' attention about we really need to prepare for this. Mm-hmm. And that can be costly, and businesses in particular, it was hard to get people's attention that we really need to prepare for, X, Y, Z, whatever the disaster is.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about the vulnerabilities in Eden Prairie, about, the stuff that runs underground, the stuff that's transported by air and rail. And, there's it's a safe community, but you learn a lot about the stuff that the different businesses and the different kinds of chemicals and things that we have in our community. But the funny thing is, at that same time, our fire chief, Scott Gerber, he was in emergency preparedness in Carver County. And he was, I'll just say it, as much of an emergency management nerd as I was. So we did a lot of training together.
He still is.
Yeah.
He did. That's what he's bringing here as well.
Good.
He was a prior podcast, but you're exactly right, Molly. I think in that time frame, before he was chief in Excelsior, he was emergency manager Carver County, and you were doing that here. No, it's still deeply ingrained.
Well, and you realize how much is at stake when you start to see what is in your community and how are you going to protect property and residents, and what happens if you didn't take this into consideration. I have to say that 9/11 changed everything in our world. It really did. But in emergency preparedness, that was a big change for business owners to take seriously the fact that you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan to get back to your business. You need to have a plan to recover. You need to have a plan to prevent. You need to exercise the plan. So that really was a game changer. Before then, when I would go out and work with businesses, I'd find that, literally, this is true, I'd find a boilerplate emergency plan that some company, some vendor had written. Yeah. And it would just basically change the name of the company. So it was the same plan, different company name.
That's maybe someone bought from some consultant and then passed it on.
Right, and they could check the box with their insurance company that they have a plan. But, the plan wasn't exercised. The plan wasn't, it was maddening, actually. Mm-hmm. But, again, it took something like 9/11 for businesses to really say, we got to take this seriously.
Yeah.
And that was a big game changer. But emergency preparedness was really a highlight of, like I said, my career with the PD.
Sure. And then how about crisis negotiation and other PD work?
Well, so the crisis negotiation team is part of the emergency response unit, and it used to be called hostage negotiation, and that kind of changed a little bit. So that was that was very interesting. We had to apply for that, and then based on your application, if you were going to be moved ahead, you had to go get psych tested, which was interesting. And then we started with training, and our lead trainer was a retired FBI agent who actually had negotiated in large cases all over the country.
Oh, wow.
And he had this persona that it's just stereotypical of the stoic FBI agent, all biz, no war stories, no. He kind of stood up and sat up straight when he walked into the room. But we trained all the time. We trained continuously because it's necessary, but we'd have an hour of lecture, and then we'd have an hour of hands-on simulation, and there was a lot. You had to learn every role because you never knew when you got a call out which role you were going to be assigned.
Okay.
So you had to learn how to be the negotiator, the coach, the scribe, all the different roles. So, and we trained with the Bloomington and St. Louis Park and Edina, Minnetonka. So we all trained as kind of a regional group. So that was very interesting work. The life skills that you learn about working with people and de-escalation and all kinds of things, certainly.
There's a lot of discussion now, present day, about de-escalation, managing certain situations. But back even 15 years ago, you were training for that and doing that, and that wasn't as talked about,
right?
As common.
Right.
But when you think about crisis negotiation, it's someone's got a phone and they're in the front yard and they're saying, come on out and we'll cut a deal, what you see on TV. Mm-hmm. But I think, you were doing that 15, 20 years ago.
Right, and I think that the dynamic, the interesting thing that I learned about is that because most of the time in police work and emergency work, time is of the essence. And so you're really trying to get there quickly, get it done quickly. And what we had to do as negotiators is slow everything down. You slow everything down. You slow down the way you speak. You slow down everything because you want to gain the trust of the person that's in crisis. And so the people on the outside who are not negotiators, who are waiting for this to be done, could get a little impatient with us sometimes. It's like, what are you doing in there?
Yeah.
Get them out of there. But so slowing down and taking every single thing that the subject would do, such as pick up the phone, such as say hello, everything was a positive. And so you kept gaining their trust by, thank you for picking up the phone, thank you for telling me what your name is, just to keep showing that this is progress.
Yeah.
And really, I think what we learned a lot, too, is about the dignity of the person who's in crisis. Yeah, it might be the bad guy. It might be somebody that's causing harm, but, approaching it in a dignity level, so you're having a bad day. Let's get beyond this. This is going to end. Let's see how we can make this end, and really trying to approach it that way. So, again, some really good life skills that transfer to all parts of life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it starts wearing the McGruff costume, but it leads all the way up to that. Holy cow. And where we started with the whole housing community services thing. So now it is, around 2003, and you've had all these different roles in the PD, and you work with the community, you work with businesses, but now housing. And in the time that I knew you and worked with you, it was all about housing and the community services work that our excellent employees in that division have done. So why that? I think you talked a little bit about why that move, but is there anything else that you can think about when you switched over?
Well, I think, too, just the changing demographic with a large immigrant population, and I think that because I had worked with that in the PD, that was easier to approach this new division that was being formed, because it would incorporate a lot of diversity.
Sure.
And I had the community background, but I also had the background with working in a diverse population. I think that would have made an easier transition for me to take over that role.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that I worked with, I also worked with in the PD. It's just kind of a different entry point.
Yeah. So when you and I would talk about different projects or issues or working with the East African community or a lot of the stuff that we worked on, you had a history with that throughout the 80s and the 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It started with, way back, the first Russian influx that we had in Eden Prairie. We had a Hmong influx, and folks lived in the same apartments that we have our immigrants in now, and then had moved on. Then we had the Russian folks come in, and we had years of that was our biggest immigrant population. Our East African, followed. So we had a lot of experience with new folks moving in, and the services that they would need. And I think that all played into why I was asked to take on this new role. To
take on that and lead that from within community development. No, I mean, I worked on a lot of projects with you where we were able to find resources and answer questions and bring people together and solve some problems as well. So how would you say housing and the options in the city have changed since you started working in that division, what would be now 16, 17 years ago?
Well, as far as affordable housing goes, the Housing Land Trust program, that started, we started that, and that's where the homeowner buys the actual structure, but a nonprofit owns the land that the structure is on. So it's not complete home ownership, but it's kind of a hybrid between rental and home ownership. That and the first-time homebuyer program that we started have gotten over 50 families to have home ownership.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That really is a lot.
Yeah.
And some folks might say only 50, but that is actually a lot. So we invest funds and help people get into home ownership. That was one of the changes. We had a new funding stream, and this gets way too in the weeds, but we have a new funding stream, TIF. I won't even start.
Sure.
But
Tax increment financing.
there are administrative funds from that we could help. And the reason that's important, Rick, is because if we use HUD money, there are income guidelines that we have to stick with. If we go with TIF, we can help homeowners that make just a little bit more. They make too much money. Their household income is too high, and we can't use HUD funds, but they still need help. So we have that. Yeah. That really helped out a lot. These are little.
No, I remember that. I mean, if I recall when I met you, that was that concept, probably 2011 or 12, when I came, that you do have CDBG money, HUD money, other money, without using too many acronyms, that are tied to a certain income. But there are a lot of people that are in that more moderate income, but still, it's not easy to afford a home in Eden Prairie. To think that you have to be below 80% of the area median income, that did free up more money, and then the rehab program, right? Now that you own a home, well, we want to help people keep your home up.
Right, and the housing rehab program, especially in our senior population, has helped a lot of seniors stay in their home. And I'll just give a plug for Jean, because she works on
Jean Karshnia,
and she's absolutely fabulous with that program and with getting seniors comfortable. We discovered that population is very tentative about wanting to enter into the rehab loan program because they didn't want to, incur any kind of debt. So we also, the emphasis, to get back to your question about what's changed, I think the emphasis on preserving existing affordable units was a high priority, which I really appreciate. It was a priority of your leadership and the council, but hanging on to every single unit that we have was very important. And so we were able to, I think in 2015, 2016, we were able to work with owners in 3 different developments, and we were able to save 100 units that would have gone market. They could have gone market.
Yeah,
we were able to entice them into staying with the affordables. Those affordables will turn market at some point. It's likely to happen, but in this biz, you take every single one you can for as long as you can get it, and you use whatever tools you have. So those were some of the things. And back when I started, a lot of properties would accept the housing choice voucher. That's also called a Section 8 voucher. That was we had probably between 250 and 300 vouchers in use in Eden Prairie for many years.
Yeah.
The market changed in the last few years, and a lot less vouchers are being accepted, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But that is, again, a market driven
market issue. Yeah, and so now there's a task force that the council appointed that's still kind of focusing on those main issues that were identified the last 10 or 15 years, maintaining affordability. I mean, it's good to get new affordable units built, and that's something you worked on and we continue to work on. But what good is that if you can't maintain what you have? Because then you might have a net loss if many of those current units aren't maintained affordable. So you're right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how did you, and I know you did this, strengthen relationships in Eden Prairie?
Well, I think showing up and being curious, always keeping an eye on what's happening, being a reader, a consumer of news, and if I saw something that happened with a business or with something in town that would make a call or say, hey, can I come and talk with you about that? You could call it being nosy. That's part of it.
Inquisitive.
Nosy, but just actually being curious about maybe a building or a service that's offered in that, and a lot of cold calling. I'll tell you that. And
would you ask to come in and see if you could take pictures of the locks and the door jams and the gaps at the doors? You were still that's still your thing. You were still into that.
Yeah. When I first started with the business stuff, I thought I'm gonna retail is probably the easiest business stuff to break into. And so I went to the Eden Prairie Center, and I went to every store, and with my card and with my different things, and talked about shoplifting, all kinds of things like that. And that was a lot of fun. And I was young, but it forced me to get out and have my voice and present myself as, a public servant, things like that. But it also, I really made a lot of friends in businesses from doing things like that. And I think it gave me a certain confidence to present myself as a member of the city and, a public servant and here to help you.
Yeah.
Some of it too, to go back to, building relationships. And I look at the leadership that Jim Clark had, and you didn't sit around. You were out to be out and doing your job. You were out to be out and in the community and knowing the community. And when I first started, he used to do this, I think, with all employees, but he drove me around the community and was pointing out the different landmarks and things like that. And you made it really clear that we serve the taxpayers. And, Jim he is not often very serious. He's a very fun guy.
He's a funny guy, right?
So when somebody like that strikes a serious tone, you listen, and it was very clear who we are. We serve the people, and we are in this community. And it was real clear that's the direction. Mm-hmm. And the way I work, that felt real good, because I don't have a problem doing that, getting out in the community.
Getting out and
being nosy and asking questions and things like that.
No, that's great. And you've been, it's hard to believe, it's 2 years, almost 2 years since you retired, right?
Right.
So and it was funny, we're gonna go up to retirement, and then I want to go back to growing up, and then I have some personal questions that I want you to answer so we can get to know you a little bit better. But what are you doing now?
Well, I actually, my husband would say I'm a little bit overextended. I am really involved in a lot of things.
Yes.
In Eden Prairie, I am the president of the Eden Prairie Noon Rotary, which is absolutely fabulous. Really good group of people. I saw that in the morning.
Yeah, I'm part of the morning. We're an okay group too.
I'm on the prop board, and again, just that board is just really, really rocking, and the agency is doing so well. It always has, but it's really doing well right now. And it's interesting being on the board there. I've known that group forever, and thought I knew a lot about it, but just learning so much more. And if you could possibly have more respect for that organization, I didn't think I could, but once I see how hard they work from a different perspective. So that's what I'm doing in Eden Prairie. I live in Chaska, so I do a lot of things in Carver County. I work on affordable housing quite a bit still through the Carver County Community Development Authority. I'm on the board there. And so
you're busy.
Yeah,
you are busy. I mean, I've seen you 3-4 times since you retired at community events, so I know you're still out and about.
Well, it's like, and I'm sure it will slow down, but it's just like it's such a freedom, and you can just do. In my case, everybody's retirement experience is different, but in mine, it was just like being a kid in a toy store or something. It's like I get to do all of the stuff that I really, really like doing, and community engagement is where I get my energy, and being out in the community. And so I'm very active.
Yeah, I think it speaks well to your career that when you retired, you still kind of stay in those avenues: housing, nonprofit work, service clubs, that were all the same groups and people that you dealt with when you worked. I think that's really, really neat. Mm-hmm. I've talked to police officers that, when I retire, what are you going to do? I'm going to go work at a florist, or I'm going to work in a hospital, which is great. To kind of totally go 180 from what you did in your career. But that shows that you liked what you were doing, and you still have something to give now that you're retired. So, speaking of that, 83, I mentioned 1983 is when you started with the city. Where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, which is about 90 miles north of Detroit. And large family, large Catholic family, and just like everybody in our community, everybody had a million kids running around. So, so Michigan at that time, as a kid, you're not maybe as familiar with what's going on, politically or in the world. So you're just involved in your kid stuff, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. All the snow, all the water, just very similar to Minnesota.
Very similar to Minnesota. Yeah. I'm from Wisconsin. Michigan is similar to that. What was your first job?
My first job was for the Saginaw Police Department.
Really?
Yeah. So I worked as a junior, I worked 3 hours a day. Every day after school, I worked 3 hours. So I would take the bus from my high school to the city hall. Then the police department was in the basement of the city hall. And then my dad, and this was downtown, and my dad worked downtown at the newspaper, and so he would come and pick me up. So after work, and we would drive home together. So it was, a good routine. So, yeah, that was.
Did you give him the inside scoop on what was really happening in the PD so you could run like a deep journalistic breakthrough article?
I don't recall having those conversations, frankly, with my dad at that time.
All right.
More focused on getting home and getting dinner.
But you had, is that where your desire to get into policing was then, all the way back to that time in school?
It actually was, and I'll tell you that, so my career path and what I wanted to do and what I went to college for in criminal justice was with the corrections focus, because I wanted to be a warden. Yeah. And that was the career path I was on, is to be a warden. And yeah, it's a very honorable position to be in.
Very much so. Yeah, I can see you as a warden.
A warden, the good warden.
The good, yes! Yeah.
The warden that helps people. Because the whole idea of corrections was my real draw, my focus of making right that which was wrong and, naive, whatever. But, whatever happened, whatever way it went. But that's exactly why I went to college and had criminal justice major.
Criminal justice major. Mm-hmm. Didn't end up being a warden, but you did work in local government. Yeah. Yeah,
I did.
You could work toward being a warden if you still want to do that.
I have a fascination with prisons. I know that's weird, but I love like Alcatraz and all the, I've been to a number of prisons, and I know that sounds very odd, but there's a
So I've toured Alcatraz as well. When my wife and I were in San Francisco, I haven't been to any other prisons. What are there some others that I should visit? Because that's the big one. That's the big one. No,
I think that that's probably you can.
That's the pinnacle. Yeah, that's the pinnacle for me. Okay, so why Minnesota? Why'd you come here then? What?
Well, I graduated from college, and there was a bit of a recession going on in Michigan. There really weren't any jobs. Those that were hiring, 300 people would show up. That was just a tough time. And my brother was a merchant sailor on the Great Lakes, and he wanted to see if he could make a life off of the Great Lakes. And so he had friends out here, and we came out, and he lasted a year. He got a marketing job, lasted a year, decided it was better on the boat, so he went back to the Great Lakes, and I stayed. And I got a job within days, because there was the economy at that time in Minnesota was just so thriving, and so it was really easy to get a job. I actually got a job in a insurance brokerage in downtown Minneapolis, and it turns out it wasn't really a job. It was like a placeholder.
Okay, all right.
Which I'm not really clear what was going on there, but it was fine. The people were really nice.
Okay, did you get a paycheck? Did you have work to do?
I didn't really have work to do. I was on my own to learn. And it was, you could tell right away that it was something rather unusual. It was a good firm, large firm, but that was my first time to work in the private sector, and I had just started. This was in the fall, in November 1st I started, and or right around that time frame. And they kept terms that I'm not used to, like hitting your mark or getting your goal, something like that.
Yeah, that's
everybody got like this big gift, this big Eddie Bauer canvas bag with all this stuff in it, and I'm like, I just got here, and they're like, no.
Take the bag. You're gonna hit your mark next
I don't
quarter.
Even know what my mark is.
Yeah. So was it selling insurance?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
What kind of insurance?
Life insurance.
Life insurance. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So then they would have like these cheese and wine parties after work, and I'm just like, is this for us? You
Yeah.
know? Like,
Yeah.
And then at Christmas time, I remember you got this book, this catalog, and you could pick out what you wanted.
What you want, because you
TV.
hit your mark. You get your gift.
My very first TV.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is private sector. This is the place to be.
Yeah.
They have all these perks, whatnot. So
But it didn't last.
It didn't last because it was not my career path, and obviously I was not being trained to do anything. I was being paid to occupy, so at some point this division could grow or whatever.
Okay.
And so that's fine. But it allowed me to do my job search, and the records clerk middle shift, which is 2 to 10, a job for Eden Prairie came open, and I had asked around the office what people knew about Eden Prairie, and there were all kinds of good things mentioned about it. I hadn't known Eden Prairie at that point, and they said it's a long drive out there, and I lived in Richfield, but
Woo! A couple cities over.
So I applied for that, and I applied for an investigator job with a law firm downtown, and I got both offers at the same time, to be an investigator in a law firm or come out
Records
to Eden Prairie.
in Eden Prairie.
So I came out to Eden Prairie, so that's how
You made the right choice.
Yeah.
You made the right
I
choice.
think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
No, that brings us to a couple questions that I have for you, personal questions. I've asked these of other people that have been on. What would be, what's probably the most interesting place you've ever visited?
Well, yeah, we've been really lucky to do a lot of traveling. One place that's really special to me is Canyonlands and just the desert Southwest, the red brick faced cliffs, and just the enormity of it. And you just the times we've been there, it transports you to it quiets your soul. I mean, that sounds kind of whatever, but you can have a lot of things going on and this and that, and somehow you get into that environment, and it's like you really mean nothing. And that's what we all need. We all need to have that, like, just quiet yourself. And I really love that part of the country. And we've gone there many times over the years, and it's always the same. So I like that piece too. That I know it's going to be a good place to go.
I thought you were going to mention like another prison, but that was a good answer. He's just like, I'm really into prisons. I'm like, that's fine. You're on a desert island. Molly, you're on a desert island. What 3 things can you bring?
Well, I would like to counter that with some assumptions. It is a domestic island. It's probably a Great Lakes island, so rescue time on the Great Lakes for these kinds of things is about 3 days. So I'm going to make an assumption that this is a short term.
That's fine. That's not a desert island, but we'll change a question to, let's say you're on a Great Lakes island for 3 days. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Well, I think, I'm a kind of a simple person, but I would bring my husband because he is a real outdoors kind of person, knows how to, like, take a seashell and make it communicate with the satellite or something. I mean, he's a real techie.
Nice. Yeah.
Survival.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. So he would have to come. I would have to bring my Kindle.
Yeah.
I think I have to bring my Kindle.
Yeah.
And it would stay charged for those 3 days.
You need it to be charged for the 3 days on the Great Lakes Island that you're going to be back from soon enough. Do you do, and I know you read a lot, do you do most of your reading on your Kindle now?
I do probably 70%.
Okay.
So not all of it, but quite a bit of it.
And it will be books that you are downloading from a library or you're purchasing? You're purchasing mainly?
Yeah.
So you can have them? Okay.
Yeah.
But 70%. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still book in hand. I don't know. I see a lot of people reading on tablets and devices, and I get that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of it can be kind of a scary thing because you hear about a good book on the radio, or you hear somebody talking about, or read a review in the paper about a good book, and it's just so easy to just hit pay.
But hey, would you say though that most of what you've gotten you've liked? You haven't been duped too many times?
No, I can think of 2 in particular times, and that's pretty good
for
me. But because I have a lot of books on my Kindle. So
and just did you stop reading them?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
This,
and that's
you got to give it. They always say you got to give it 70, 80 pages, no matter what.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Then and these are not books I recommended
No.
to you, because we share lists back and forth, and they're not like ones I've told you about.
No. All of the ones you've given have been really top notch.
Same with you. Same with you. What if you won the lottery? What's the first purchase you would make?
I would buy a rowing shell. My son is a rower for the University of Minnesota men's crew, and a rowing shell would be one of the things I'd like for him to have for up at our lake.
How much does that cost?
I think they're like 40, 50,000.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you won like the Daily 3 or something. You didn't win like the $1 million lottery. You won like the $50,000 one. Well, that's nice. What would you say is a special talent that you have that not many people know about?
Well, I think that it's putting puzzle pieces together, not of the literal puzzle, but of figuring out clues and hints and
anything that you would be watching or seeing that you kind of figure it out.
Right. I figure it out, or I find physical evidence of something or other, and I can figure out where this came from or how this came to be, or yes, there was a party in the house. No, Mom, there wasn't a party in the house.
Yes, I like those puzzles.
It's like,
yes.
Just things, whatever. Observant, maybe.
Yeah,
observation.
absolutely.
So
and
maybe
analytical skills.
Yes.
Putting pieces together, observational skills of seeing what's going on. My mom would just make up a story to say, I think I found this in the house and you had a party, and it was a total bluff. And she would hopefully get me to admit it, but she had no proof. She did not solve a puzzle. She just wanted to suck me into answering a question on something she made up. It didn't work. But you could figure it out.
We had, and when we lived in Prior Lake one night, we heard a big crash in the middle of the night. We went out, and a car had hit our mailbox.
Ooh, yeah.
And so the next day I went out, and the only evidence there was part of a nameplate, and it was like Gran Torino, so it was only the Reno part. It didn't say Torino. So that's the only piece of evidence besides the shards of wood and stuff from our mailbox. And I used that to figure out and to track down the car.
The exact person.
So.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And then you would say, if you and your husband or family are watching something, you pretty much know how any mystery is going to end.
Not any, but I have a pretty good track record of a lot of them. So
yeah, but you don't give it away. You keep it to yourself.
You
don't ruin the ending.
I really have a hard time with that. I really struggle with not blurting it out.
Yeah.
So
it's okay. Couple more, and then we'll wrap up. What would you say, Molly, has been your proudest moment?
I would say my proudest moment professionally would be when we opened up the Office of Housing and Community Services in the basement of the mall. Like I mentioned before, worked so hard to get that and to make that a reality. And physically, there was just so much that went to that. And the staff was here at the City Hall when we opened, and they moved in, and they just started to conduct their biz. There was no drama. They started seeing clients almost immediately. And I just remember standing in the hallway looking at that, thinking, feeling that pride, like if you can allow yourself to feel that, like we did this. And I was just so proud that they just set up and went right to work. Yeah. And I was quite proud of that.
That is, no, that's nice. You get to make one rule. What one rule would you make?
Nobody goes hungry.
Well, we'll get working on that. Okay. Thank you for coming in, Molly.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah.